Hello everyone, my name is Shreyans and this is a series on developing your equity research process. Now we're going to get started with ratios. So we've done a lot of the financial work till now, and ratios would be a sort of a basic quantitative analysis tool. This time round, we're just going to be concerned more towards the calculation of the ratios and the things to take care of while calculating them. And when we move on to the last part related to our numbers module, so to speak, then we think about the analysis or the observations or insights that we derive from these ratios. Now before we really move on to the specific ratios and the different categories of ratios, first I want to talk about a few basic things that are common and we need to take care of while we calculate the different types of ratios. So let's get started. Right now, I think anyone who studied any sort of accounting knows a lot about ratios, right? We've studied this in school, we studied this in college, even in any professional course, ratios are there in nearly all subjects, right? And what is the reason for that? That is because these are a very basic quantitative analysis tool, and they are in most cases quite easy to apply because we're going to apply these on numbers, right? So now what are the things we need to take care of? First of all, that the formulas that we're taught in our academics are very simple and straightforward, and most of the examples are also very simple and straightforward. But the first thing to understand is that there are different variations of the formulas, right? For example, ratios such as return on capital employed can be calculated using closing capital employed or average capital employed, right? Or some people might calculate it using EBIT, or some people might calculate it using EBITDA, right? So and something like even something as simple as profit margins, right? So something like a gross margin or an EBIT margin, some people might include non-operating income in that, and some people might exclude non-operating income on that. So there are different variations of any sort of a formula of any ratio, right? With few ratios there are no variations, but with quite a few ratios there are variations. So whatever variation you apply, please have a reasonable basis for that and apply that formula consistently over whatever period you're analyzing. For example, we took at least 5 years of financial statements, so we'll also calculate the ratios for all of those 5 years, right? And if you apply one variation of the formula in 1 year and another variation in another year, then it just doesn't make sense, right? Because if there is no consistency in applying the formula, then we cannot compare the ratios. So consistency is very, very important. In fact, it's a prerequisite to do any sort of comparative study, right? So pick up whatever variation you feel is justified and then apply that variation of the formula consistently. The next thing is to include and exclude components. As I was talking about that in our textbooks or in our academics, the formulas are very straightforward and very simple, right? But with any ratio where we have the numerator and denominator, where there are several components of the numerator or denominator. This is especially true with respect to ratios that involve balance sheet items, right? For example, capital employed. Now we know that capital employed is debt plus equity, but and we know it is long-term debt, but what all components of long-term debt should go into that, right? And if there are any parts of equity that should not go into that. So there are certain components that you might need to include and exclude while calculating different ratios, right? And this is especially true with balance sheet figures or any sort of figure where we need to combine different items, right? So be very careful, and you might need to think a little bit about this, that which components to include and which to exclude. So a good way to approach this is first apply the basic formula that you understand, right, without really thinking too much about the breakdown of whatever figures or the components, and then you pick up the ratios which you feel okay, there are certain components here, so let me take a look at which all components should be present and which all should be removed, and then you can maintain, or then you can apply this inclusion or exclusion of components. Another important thing is whenever you're going to apply any sort of ratios in your workbook, please make a column that writes where you write down the formula that you've applied, that which all items have been included and which all have been excluded, so that you know that what is the basic analysis of this, right? So start with the basic formula, then grill it down or then narrow it down to the components and include and exclude as required. Again, very important, whatever components you exclude in 1 year should be excluded in the next year and for all the years. So consistency of the formula is really, really important. And finally, whenever we're going to analyze any sort of ratios, we're going to not just look at a single ratio for a single year, but we're going to look at the overall trend. First of all, we can look at the broad trend within the company, that how is the company's performance evolving, and how is it doing with respect to its past performance. And then we can also compare it with respect to the industry median, or with against the industry leader, so to speak, to understand how well or how poorly the company is doing. And another thing is that a lot of the ratios are also interrelated, so to speak. So a lot of times what you might find is a certain ratio that is going up, and there might be another ratio that is going down, and there might be some sort, because there might be common items, right? Or there might be trade-offs with respect to how the company allocates its capital or uses its resources. So in that case, what you would want to look at is a combination of ratios, and figure out that, okay, instead of just looking at a single ratio and concluding that, oh, this is very bad, or oh, this is amazing, just look at a set of different ratios to have a holistic picture of the business, rather than focusing so much on just single ratios. All right, so this is pretty much what I had with respect to the different ratios. And next time around, what we're going to do is discuss each of the category of the ratios. So we have profitability ratios, efficiency ratios, solvency ratios, liquidity ratios, and return on capital related ratios. And also we do the dew point breakdown of the return on capital related ratios. But these were the basic things that I hope you can take care of while calculating ratios. Please apply the formulas consistently, write down the formula or the variation of the formula that you've applied. Do that extra bit of work to understand that which all components should be excluded and included while you're calculating certain ratios. So this is it for this time around, and next we're going to move to specific ratios. If you found this helpful, please stay tuned as we move forward in the process.